Hello and welcome. So today's video I'm just going to be talking about my experience with Dwarf Rats so far. I've had August. My cat is here and so is a kitten messing with a tripod. I've had Dwarf Rats for about a little over a year and a half now. Well over a year and a half actually, but not quite 2 years. Hey baby. And I just kind of want to talk about my experience with them because I feel like a lot of people go in to Dwarf Rats with this expectation that they're going to be a certain way, and a lot of times they aren't. So I just wanted to discuss it and my experience with them. And with that, I'm going to do two prefaces. One, there's obviously going to be some negatives in this. I don't think they're like the perfect rat for every situation and every one. So I am going to be going into the negatives, but that does not mean I do not have a deep love for all of my Dwarf Rats. It is not a statement on their character or anything like that. Two, just because my experience has been a certain way doesn't mean yours is going to be perfect or awful. Everyone's experience is their own. I get that sometimes where I say that all of my rats, for example, all my female rats have been fairly affectionate and cuddly, and someone will comment, well, none of mine have been. And it's like, that's unfortunate for you, but that doesn't affect my experience with mine being super sweet and cuddly. So your experience is yours, mine is mine. Just saying. Now let's get into it. So one thing that is often said about Dwarf Rats is that they tend to be a lot healthier than standard size rats. And in some cases, yes, but in some cases, no. So I have 3 Dwarf Rats at the moment who are within the age range of having a tumor, and none of them have gotten one. And with 3 standard sized females that are all intact, chances are pretty high that at least one of them would get one. And none of my 3 dwarfs that are in that range have gotten one. So there is that. However, I will say that it is only mammary gland tumors that they are resistant to. They can still get tumors if they're severely overweight. They can get cancerous tumors. In fact, a lot of them do, specifically Zimbal's gland tumors or other forms of malignant cancerous tumors are not that uncommon in dwarfs. And they are still capable of even getting a mammary gland tumor. It's just very rare. Another thing is that they are less prone to things like HLD, which as far as I've seen is extremely true. I have never seen a dwarf rat with HLD unless they had some other health condition first, such as a stroke. So that is very true. However, HLD is not that big of a deal in standards. I find like it usually hits them pretty late in life for me. So I don't necessarily have an issue with HLD with my standards. Like Baker does have it now, but he is 2.5, so you know, he's a very, very old man. A couple of other things that a lot of people say about dwarfs is that they tend to smell less and that they have less behavioral issues. So with that, I'm going to go through my rats individually and talk about them to kind of explain what my experience has been. And we'll start with my oldest, which are Genimo and Joja, and we'll start with Genimo. Now Genimo doesn't have any behavioral issues, and Genimo and Joja's cage does not really smell at all typically. However, they are seniors now, and around a year and a half, which is when even dwarf rats, yes, are seniors. They do tend to live a little bit longer than standards, but again, they can live longer, but most of the dwarfs I see still end up passing away between 2 and 2.5, because can live longer and will live longer are different. So August is halfway up the wall. She's been climbing the door frames, so I just saw her tail like halfway up the wall. So anyway, at the 1.5 year mark, Genimo did start developing some issues a little bit before that, actually. First, she got a papilloma on her tongue, which is basically like a little wart. Humans can get them too. And it had to be frozen off, and it had to happen twice. And during that time, it was very difficult for her to eat. She was having some respiratory issues because of it, because it was just this big lump in her mouth and it was hard for her to breathe. And I'm happy that it's been taken care of and that wasn't that big of a deal. However, at the same time, possibly in connection, I'm not sure, she also developed malocclusion, and that's where their teeth don't line up properly, so they cannot grind them down properly. And this can affect their eating and breathing as well. So Junimo does have malocclusion, and she needs consistent tooth trims every 3 to 4 weeks. Some rats, it has to be done more frequently, some less frequently. With Junimo specifically, it's every 3 to 4 weeks. And this is very expensive. I haven't had to deal with malocclusion in my standard rats, so this is just her. It can happen in standard rats. This is not happening because she's a dwarf. But when you go in being told that dwarf rats are cheaper to keep, and then you end up with one who requires you to spend over $100 every single month for their teeth to be trimmed, it adds up quickly until your dwarf rat becomes your most expensive rat. So, you know, that is a thing. Some people say that you can trim their teeth at home. I don't recommend this. If you clip their teeth at home, you can break the tooth in half all the way up to the tooth root, which is extremely painful for your rat. It is very easy to mess up, even on a standard size rat. Junimo is 135 grams. She is this big, and her teeth are very tiny. It would be so easy for me to mess that up. I much prefer to take her to the vet, and also she fights. She fights like the devil. They have to use anesthesia on her, which is why it costs so much. And so they use a drill to burr her teeth down, which is the safer option and causes less damage than clipping them does. So that's Junimo. Now let's talk about Joja. Now, one thing with Joja is you probably noticed she's pretty heavy, and dwarf rats do tend to be obese. That's one of the negative things with dwarfs. Joja in particular, I have had no luck. I feed them the same as I feed all of my other dwarfs. And she's like bigger dwarf, just like size wise, not weight wise in general. But she gains weight so easily, whereas Junimo, who is much smaller, does not. Whereas those guys who are smaller do not. And I have tried so many things to get her to lose weight, and it just does not work. So that is one factor to keep in mind, is dwarfs can be obese. Joja is one of them. And the other thing with Joja is that she has hormonal aggression. She has severe hormonal aggression to where I haven't been successful with introducing her to other rats. Now, she's very sweet with me. She's so sweet with me. She and Junimo pick at each other a lot. I really wish if I could go back and change anything, I would have gotten a third dwarf to go in with them. I still would have gotten them because I adore them. I just would have gotten a third so that they could have like another sibling. But this does mean that I will have to, if Junimo passes away first, I'm going to have to figure Joja out. It is a very stressful thing for me. Behavioral issues in general can stress me out. So with Joja, it's not the most ideal. Hi, baby. My cat's here. So with Joja, it is not my favorite thing that I have to deal with. But, you know, they are okay right now, and I will deal with whatever comes when it comes. Now, moving on to my first trio that I got. Let's start with Polychrome because she's the oldest. And I don't really have any issues with Polly. She does have a head tilt from an ear infection. However, ear infections aren't, you know, I'm mentioning it because it's a health issue she had, but it is just as common in standards as it is in dwarfs. I've never noticed any, like, uptick of dwarfs getting ear infections over standards. But, so she's fine, and she's super sweet. I've never had any issues with her behaviorally. She is exactly what she should be. She is a perfect little baby angel. However, Mystic's the next oldest. And yeah, she's a little bit chunky right now, but mostly her issues. One, I don't know why, but she just has very loose stools. And I have no idea why. It has been this way for months. I hadn't changed their diet. I hadn't changed their water. I hadn't started giving them any new food. She just started developing looser stools. And it's not like, she doesn't have like an infection or anything. It's just like an issue that specifically she has. So I have to clean her up occasionally. And the other issue with Mystic is that she does have an attitude. I wouldn't call it aggression the way Joja has aggression, but she's mean. She is just mean to other rats. Every single morning, she gets into a fight with someone in that cage. And she's always the aggressor. Someone else is always trying to submit to her. It's never Polly. She's never gone after Polly. I have seen her go after Glitch, but it is usually Summer Bonnet or Agatha that she goes after. And I usually have to go and break it up because she doesn't... They have to run away. If they don't run away, if they can't get away, she won't stop. And again, it's not quite hormonal aggression because it's not territorial. It's not really over food. She just gets mad sometimes, and she just stays mad for a little bit until they get away, and then she calms right down. But she sleeps with them, she grooms them, she lets them groom her. She's sometimes sweet with them. Most of the time she's sweet with them. She's just kind of mean a lot of the time. Now Glitch, I don't really have any problems with her. She's pretty healthy. I've never had an issue with her other than the fact that she's very skittish. And she doesn't like anyone but me. Like, Cappy gives them all treats at night so that she can see everyone because she wants to love the rats. And Glitch will never, has never once come out for her to give her a treat. But if Cappy's not here to give the treat, she immediately comes out to me. So that's not necessarily a problem. It's just that it took me a long time to get to that point with her where she does trust me. And again, she's super sweet. She gives me cuddles, she gives me kisses, and she's just a little skittish. And that's not that big of a deal to me personally. I know some people really hate that, but I do find my dwarfs tend to run first and ask questions later. And with Glitch, it's just kind of turned up to 10. We're gonna get into my second trio of dwarfs, and we're gonna start with Agatha. Health-wise, Agatha's fine. Personality-wise, she's mostly fine. My main issue with her is that she chews the bars. And I typically, when a rat chews the bars, it is a sign of boredom or stress. So I just keep putting things in the cage. I just keep putting new things, new nesting materials, new foraging toys, new chew toys, just new things constantly. And it has never once made her stop chewing on the bars. Not a single time has she stopped chewing on the bars. And it's gotten to a point where there's 3 or 4 parts of that cage where the bars are damaged because every single day she just chews the bars. And it's like, oh, well, maybe she just wants out to run around. But no, I would take her out for free roam and she doesn't do anything. I put her back in the cage, she immediately starts chewing the bars. She's not the most affectionate with me, so it's not that she wants my attention either, because again, I give her a lot of attention. Or as much as she wants, she does, like, she has a limit. It's like, okay, it's been like 5-10 seconds, we're done now, we're good. And that's fine with me. But then I put her back in the cage and she starts chewing the bars. So that is a problem, and it's very frustrating because that cage was in pristine condition until she started doing this. And at this point, I don't know what to do other than just keep putting stuff in the cage. Just keep trying things, and maybe one day she'll stop. And that is not something I've had to deal with my standards. My standards have never chewed the bars like that. The worst it's ever been is I'd put them back in the cage when they weren't ready to be back in the cage, and they'd chew the bars to let me know they weren't ready. Or they do it when I'm feeding them and they're excited, which is different. Now on to Summer. Summer is a sweetheart. She's very kissy. She's very cuddly. She's the most beautiful little baby. But she does have a pretty significant health issue, that being what I think is a respiratory problem with an underlying cause of heart failure, which is, she's been dealing with it for most of the time that I've had her, and it does really suck because I can't do much for her. She's really hard to diagnose because she is only this big, which is a thing with rats, with dwarf rats, rats in general, you can't really diagnose heart failure through imaging, as in x-rays, because they're so small, and dwarf rats are even smaller. So there's a lot of things you can't do with dwarf rats, like, for example, x-rays. Not to mention she have to be sedated for the x-rays, and I don't trust her lungs to be able to handle that. But yeah, you can't really do x-rays with them for things like heart failure. A lot of times you can't do surgeries with them because they're too small. Both of those things are things that stress me out a lot, especially the surgeries, because since I do have females, if they need to have an emergency spay for pyometra, I just might not be able to do that. And in fact, in all likelihood, I wouldn't be able to do that because of how tiny they are. My vet prefers them to be at least 200 grams to do a spay, and the majority of my dwarfs are under 200 grams. Bonnet, also, she's very, very sweet. She's very, very cuddly. I adore her. She has the same issues as Summer. She has severe respiratory issues with what I think is an underlying cause of heart failure. And again, vets just do not want to give you the medication unless they can diagnose the heart failure. And she's just too small for anything to come up on the imaging. And that really, really, really sucks. The other thing about my dwarfs is they stink. They smell so bad. They smell worse than my group of 6 girls. They smelled worse than my group of 7 rats. I had 2 groups of 7 rats at some point, and neither of their cages really smelled that bad. But the dwarf cage reeks constantly. And I go in and I clean it at the appropriate times, no more than once a week will I wipe down everything. I have to remove all the fleece very frequently. I have to spot clean very frequently. I have to wipe down everything almost daily because it just reeks in that cage. And you might be thinking it's just that group because I said Junimo and Jojo were okay. Scylla and Lois, they are this big. They are like significantly under 100 grams. And Cappy has told me that she's been sitting on her bed. They're in a cage this size and they are puny. And Cappy has told me that she's been sitting on her bed and she could smell them. So for some reason, my dwarf girls just smell way worse than my standard size girls. They probably smell better than standard size males, but that's not really saying much. So the problem with that is it makes it hard to keep their cage sanitary for them. Because every time I can smell them, I have to go in, find what smells, and remove that item so that they don't get sick. And it's working for the most part. I really worry about Summer and Bonnet specifically because they have like such a severe health condition, both of them. And you might be wondering, yes, the two of them are related. And they're cousins. So like it could be a genetic issue, it could not be a genetic issue. It's not the fault of the breeder if it is. These things can just kind of crop up in your lines. No rat's going to be 100% healthy. So blaming the breeder doesn't really get you anywhere. A lot of times it's nothing they did. It just is. So like I'm not upset with the breeder or anything. That just is with them. They're just sick. Now Scylla and Lois are both fine. They're just little babies. They're little bouncy babies. And if you saw my video a couple of weeks ago, you know I got another rat with them named Aura. And while her being a dwarf is not the reason she passed away on the transport, it didn't help because dwarf rats can be harder to diagnose, basically. It can be harder to see that they're sick because they're smaller. I find that sometimes they don't make as much noise as standard size rats. You really have to pay attention to them. You have to pay attention to how they're breathing. You have to check on them frequently. I've seen other people have the same issue where their rats got sick and they didn't really make noise. Whereas with standards, they'll almost always make noise. With dwarf rats, I've seen it where they just don't make any noise. And then all of a sudden they're very, very, very ill. Now, is that what happened with Aura? I don't know because I wasn't there. I couldn't monitor her. It happened while she was in a car on her way to me. So I have no idea how obvious her sickness was. I will say that I personally have not experienced that with my dwarfs, but I've seen enough other people say they've experienced it with their dwarfs that I do believe that is a thing that can happen, but I don't know. My dwarfs, like Summer and Bonnet, never made any noise when they started showing respiratory symptoms, but antibiotics have also do not help them. Bonnet's been on antibiotics for about 5 weeks now, and she's still breathing very heavily. So, is it an issue with dwarfs? Yeah, possibly. I think that Bonnet and Summer have an underlying heart condition because the antibiotics never really put a dent in how heavily they were breathing. And with other rats I've had that their first symptom was heavy breathing or a symptom was heavy breathing, antibiotics helped unless they had a heart condition. So what am I saying here, basically? What I'm saying is that my experience with dwarf rats has not been 1,000% amazing. It's been a lot of ups and downs, like way more than with my standard size rats, for example. Because all these health issues are ones I can get with standard size rats, but I have not gotten them with this kind of frequency and consistency as I have had with my dwarfs. The behavioral issues I do get with my standard size rats because there's one of my issues right now. I have a knack for picking the mean ones. I just do. And that is translated into my dwarfs. I just have a knack for picking mean ones. So like that is kind of a moot point for me with the dwarfs. And the thing is, again, you could get dwarf rats and have an amazing 100% amazing experience with them. And you could get dwarf rats and have a terrible experience with them. I'm just kind of discussing my thoughts on it, which is that for me, getting dwarf rats is not easy. They are not close to me. I have to go out of my way to get them. And with what happened with Aura, and her being a dwarf rat is a factor here because she was so tiny. If you don't know what you're looking for, you can so easily miss it. She was so tiny. She was just a teeny tiny baby dwarf rat. She was 50 grams. With what happened with Aura, it's hard sometimes for me to justify continuing getting dwarfs, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to resolve that because I can never really trust transport again. Not fully, not to the extent that I would like to. Does that mean I'm not going to get dwarfs? No, that does not mean I'm not going to get dwarfs. It means that I have to figure out what I want necessarily. Because I may decide to move away from dwarfs, I may decide to keep getting them. I do adore my dwarfs, they're such sweet babies. I love them so much. But the standards have the same issues. But I can fix it in the standards in a way I can't fix it with the dwarfs. And that is a big factor for me. I do not like feeling helpless when it comes to my pet's health. It stresses me out so much. And again, you guys can have an amazing experience with your dwarfs. If you're curious about them, I say go for it if you have them nearby. If you have to use a transport, I say proceed with caution. So yeah, I've had a very middling experience with Dwarf Rats so far. Again, I adore mine. I'm just talking about generally the health and like behavioral things that I was hoping for with my dwarfs versus my standards that I have not gotten. So yes, that is the point of this. But yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!